Okay, so for this project, I have chosen Sia's documentary called Music, where she's depicting a young girl with autism, quote unquote, navigating the world around her. And I have a few bones to pick, which I will share following this. But essentially, we don't really learn anything about music's character throughout the film. And all we see are misrepresentations of autism, that the main character does not, like the actor does not have autism, yet is cast in this role. So it's very important that they treaded carefully, which they didn't, and we will discuss that. So as soon as the movie starts, I found it super uncomfortable to watch, just like witnessing it. It looked like I was like watching a crime.
It's a very cringy.
It's bad. From the start, it just seems like it's going off on the wrong foot, but don't let us tell you that, we'll show you.
It's important for people to know autism. It's incredibly diverse, as many refer to it. It's a spectrum, and watching someone depict it from a neurotypical perspective is inherently problematic. They cannot speak to what autism is.
And on top of that, I'm pretty sure it's Maddie Ziegler is music in this movie, and I think she was 14 at the time. So anyway, moving right along.
The first bone we have to pick, we're going to discuss some of the language they use, the framing, and how their script created a problematic disability identity. Roll the clip.
Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health.
Listen, do you guys do pickup? Like if I got a kid that needs to be picked up, or do I have to come in and drop her off?
Pickup? You mean like a laundry service? No, we don't do pickup.
But like, what if I wasn't here?
But you are there.
But what if I wasn't?
But you are.
But what if I wasn't? Hello?
I do not feel good about bringing you along here with me today. Can we try not to have one of your freakouts up there, all right? Like, I do not know these people, but apparently they're loaded, and I'd really like to keep them as clients. So can we get it out now? Just like, if you can try to get it out now. Okay. All right.
Okay, so basically after watching this clip, what really, I guess I can see is very triggering is the, like, don't have one of your freakouts by this, like, main character of the film. It's kind of, the language used is just inconsiderate. I understand if the character is that type of person, but this is a big film, one of its kind, and you know, they missed the mark everywhere else. It's easy to assume that they just didn't think about the fact that this would do so much more harm than good. So basically, have one of your freakouts. Let's think about it a little bit further. I mean, no one's even thinking about why music is having like an episode right now. It's not considered that, hey, like, let's fix everything else. There's something wrong with her.
From our research, there's a lot about this, particularly in the Holler et al. Reading. We found that sociolinguistic changes in media can empower or degrade individuals. So I have a quote here. Media framing through negative terminology can even prove detrimental to the self-images of people with disabilities. And that again is from Holler et al. On page 66.
Yeah, and on top of this, if you guys know what a self-fulfilling prophecy is, basically people who actually, you know, have these disabilities and like sit here and watch this like high-budget A-lister movie about autism, they're sitting there, you know, internalizing it. As with everyone else who's uneducated about it, the people who actually have it are suffering even more, because with the self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, they see it in media. It's the only one of its kind. It's all they see in the media. And then it's like, oh, so I guess I'm like that. And then they start, you know, accommodating to the stereotype, which is so bad.
Exactly. And on the flip side, neurotypical people may see this language like freak out, and they're not given any other education or any other language or any other option to refer to what that looks like for someone with autism that's not quite so negative. And since this is the only film out there that really depicts someone in this light, it's important that they're really mindful about their language, even if the character is, you know, trying to be a little like ableist.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't like the right time, place, or like spot for Sia to produce this, but yet she did. But okay. Yeah, just for like reference, like meltdown would work. It needs to just be normalized, but that is a correct terminology, which I do not use.
Yeah, freak out was rather negative.
Like freak out, like come on. Anyway,
next bone we have to pick is about disability imagery in media, and more like the visual representation of the disability we got from this film. Roll the clip.
Little Miss Muffet, where you been hiding yourself? Got a lot of pups for you today. 10 dogs. New National Geographic. Gold mine.
yeah, so throughout this whole film, I just want to start with the hand gestures. It is something that is called self-soothing, and it is a thing that people with autism do to self-soothe themselves from the stimulus in their environment. Now, the way that it's being depicted here is over-exaggerated, overused. It's not even like a direct effect of any sort of environmental like aspect of the film. It is just a constant like over-exaggeration, which is humiliation to people who actually use self-soothing methods, which is good for people with autism who need to self-soothe.
Did I do a negative?
It's just one of those things where it's like, obviously, obviously the research done behind this and the execution by the production team, absolute zero. Rotten Tomatoes 0.
-2.
One more thing is I didn't even mention, like, once again, no one's paying attention to why. Like, we don't know anything about this main character. Yeah. Nothing. We know that she likes dogs. That's all that I learned after watching this film. And music, but, you know, it's her name.
Bro, I like dogs and music.
I don't even like dogs, actually, so... I mean, I don't know, Clifford had something, but I'm not too... Yeah, so it's just... Everything is so ableist.
Yeah, it's very over-exaggerated. It's very uncomfortable to watch. The way Maddie uses her eyes, her smile, gestures, it's just all overgeneralized. Even the way they depict restraint as being, like, the most helpful form of soothing, like, throughout the movie several times, like, they are shown to, like, learn that, like, pinning her down to the ground is, like, the best way to calm her down.
Like, what? Can we talk about the fact that, I understand, like, restraint can be helpful, like, maybe, like, 5% of the time. It's so, like, not normal to do that. And number 2, if it does need to happen, you have to think about, okay, like, what would that person need, right? Like, what is hurting them so bad right now? I'm gonna go ahead and take a wild guess from experience and say that it's their environmental stimuli. Okay, so instead of pinning them to the freaking ground, you could just cover their eyes, you know, make them feel safe, and don't treat them like some pit bull about to eat your poodle. I mean, I don't understand, like, why we're pinning this to the ground.
The use of restraint is incredibly overgeneralized, and it's inhumane.
It's so bad.
So, applying some of our research to this imagery they've used. We know media representation is important and it's increasing, but it's far from perfect. So in this reading from Holler and Ralph, on page 299, they say, of course, as with all advertising, only pretty people can become models. Oftentimes, disabilities come with visual cues, and only the most palatable are included in media, or maybe the most common or stereotypical. But progress, like representation, it's still improving attitudes in society. However, the imagery has to be natural and accurate. Those are the most important things when it comes to depicting disability imagery, particularly to those with disabilities and for those who don't have them.
And another thing that just kind of ticked me off is the fact that, you know, not only have they failed us in every other way of representing this, like, autistic character, even if they're nonverbal, just absolutely incorrectly, it's the way that, you know, we don't see music throughout the film at all alone. Like, someone's always taking care of her, someone's always, like needs to be there. It's disheartening to watch because most of autism is high functioning. The only thing that creates any sort of dysfunction is the society around the people who have autism. It's saying that you're not good enough, like you can't do this, you can't do that, like you're not normal. And then they sit down and watch this movie like, what?
Right.
It's just insane how inconsiderate all of it is. So yeah, like I think that while I have no issue with a neurotypical person representing a neurodivergent person in any sort of film, but like we said at the start, it has to be done like accurately. Like obviously, like do your research with, I don't know, someone who's not Autism Speaks. I'm going to talk about that. Their organization is the worst. They are ableist in and of themselves, and it's a highly controversial organization. Who did the research for this film, by the way? Look it up, guys. I don't understand how it's still bad. But yeah, so I have no issue with, you know, a neurotypical person doing this, but it has to be done right. And if it's not done right, I suggest you stop the production of your film, honestly.
Okay, so last and maybe most important point here is media participation by those with disabilities. And the reading that we had from Dr. Gray from this year really delved into this really well. And in the movie, we know that it was produced by Sia. Maddie Ziegler is casted as the main character. Kate Hudson was casted as another main character, her sister. These three work together very often in all of their art and their business projects. And apparently they didn't think it was worth branching out, using more time or money to recruit creative talent for accurate representation purposes. And by doing that, they did not avoid misrepresentation. And like Gray says in their writing, such access to media participation can directly influence our capacity to overcome stigmatization and acquire the cultural, social, and material capital needed to become fully liberated. Later they say, the combination of creative arts and commerce illuminates a key tension between the two for those who hold power within these roles, which is often not people with a disability.
Yeah, like most people watching this know who Maddie is outside of this film. No, she does not behave like that naturally. And so when they see the difference, there go the stereotypes, there go the labeling, there goes any chance of progression here in this horrible, horrible, horrible situation we have here in our society. But yeah, I know her from Dance Moms. You may not know her from Dance Moms, but just seeing the difference is like degrading. And it's, you know, once again, she was 14, not her fault. And she even came out later and was like, I was not comfortable doing that. Like, yeah, definitely the adults at fault here, but still, I just think that if accurate representation was a priority of theirs, they didn't do it once. And if anything, the only thing that they accurately depicted in this film was how the rest of the world treats people with disabilities, and that's really poor. That is it.
Yeah. It's worth noting.
Oh yeah, there were two people with autism who auditioned. One of them got the role, was put on the set with a bunch of neurotypical people and their neurotypical needs, etc., etc. Long story short, she was like, I'm distressed. And then they were like, we're moving pretty fast with production. Like, we can't accommodate that. And then put Maddie in that spot. So it was like, oh, so like the one thing that matters, like if you're going to depict this disability, which is not often depicted in the media, you need to do it right, and yet you can't make... It's like a high-budget film. Sia, everyone knows who Sia is. It's A-list actors, and you don't have the budget or the time or consideration to incorporate the one person who actually deserves to be behind the camera or in front of it.
Precisely. And Dr. Gray described that same exact experience in their writing. They were distressed being in a production. No accommodations were made to keep them included, which was the most important part of the whole production, and it didn't happen. So, in conclusion, because there's a lack of representation in the media, this is all consumers have to build their conception of nonverbal people with autism, and it becomes even more important to include autistic people in the production process and to use inclusive and positive language and depict them accurately and mindfully.
Yeah, it's just a culmination of, you know, I wish I expected more, but I don't, and that's wrong. And that means there's something really wrong. So yeah, I think for sure, like, yeah, I definitely can't wait to see that. Can't wait till it happens. Like, people are actively being represented in the media because they're playing roles that they are qualified for, and people who aren't qualified for them aren't playing those roles. Long story short, if this movie was set out to further stigmatize autism, it did a great job. But all in all, like, honestly, like, nobody's gonna sit there and try to, like, produce something that's just, you know, ableist, yet they did.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's like, oh, so finally we see a film with autism, and then it's like, ooh.
The intentions were so good, but the execution was so poor.
At this point, you shouldn't have made it, because it just made everything worse.
Yeah.
So.
And that makes me want to ask you, is it ever possible to create inclusive and conducive media about someone with a disability without anyone with that specific disability being involved in the production process?
It's for you guys. It's for the class.
All right. Thank you.
Think about it.
Food for thought.